Good morning. This is Kimberly Tyson. I'm the Marketing and Program Director for the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center and Nightlight Christian Adoptions. And we're here today to talk about a new program being managed by the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center. And I'd like to just start out the morning with a quote that I read yesterday by Winston Churchill, and I thought it was really appropriate. The pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity, and the optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty. And we know that the number of embryos in frozen storage is increasing every year, and the number of embryos that become abandoned is increasing every year. And that's the focus of our presentation today, is abandoned embryos. You may or may not have noticed, but certainly I noticed because I'm the marketing person, that embryo adoption has been in the news quite a bit recently. Articles in People magazine, on Good Morning America, on various local newscasts and large distributed magazines like Time. And our Snowflakes embryo adoption program, which was the first embryo adoption program in the world, doubled the number of adopting families in 2014. And you may have seen just recently in the news a couple in Tennessee who had 6 remaining embryos decided to try and find a family via their Facebook account, and they had hundreds of families respond to their desire to place those embryos into a family. So we know that people are definitely interested in using donated embryos, either matched in an anonymous fashion or matched in a directed fashion. So we know people are definitely interested, and that's why one of the ideas that I had for the grant this year was to figure out how could we get more embryos moved from being in a state of suspension, abandoned, to being used. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today, and we're looking for some partners in that. Next week, we will have a webinar on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. again, Mountain Time, which is about taking the fear out of openness. And so openness is an adoption term. Obviously, we function in the adoption world, and this is a woman who's adopted a couple children from the domestic adoption program, not Nightlight's program, but a domestic adoption, and she goes around the country talking about taking fear out of the openness equation. So you might have some folks in your organization that might be interested in attending that webinar, and you can register for that at embryoadoption.org. I would like to remind you that our webinar is being recorded today. We have a number of clinics that weren't able to join us for this half-hour presentation this morning, so we wanted to be able to record it and we'll be sending it out to them and a copy to you as well, so you can watch it again and catch any mistakes that I make, okay? So here we go. Of course, I have to remember how to operate the system. So you help families get built every day. When couples are struggling and they're wanting to give up on this dream of having a family, your clinic is stepping in to help them make that a reality. And we both have the same goal, to help patients become parents. And so Nightlight, as I mentioned, is an adoption agency. We have been an adoption agency since 1959, so we've been around a long time. And we do domestic adoption, international adoption, foster adoption. We also have the world's first embryo adoption program that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, called the Snowflakes Embryo Adoption Program. Soon we'll be celebrating the birth of our 400th baby from the program. We've had more than 1,000 embryos donated through the program. I forget how many families that represents, but I think, oh, I'm sorry, it's more than 1,000 families, and it's more than 5,000 embryos. I knew I had some numbers mixed up there. So, you know, it's a very robust program. People are really participating in it. As I mentioned earlier, we doubled the number of adopting families in the program last year, and so there definitely is an interest out there in embryo adoption and embryo donation. You may or may not be aware that there are well over 600,000 embryos in frozen storage in the U.S. Many clinics tend to stick to the numbers that were gathered back in 2001 through the RAND-SART survey. I did another clinic census back in 2011 through California State University through their Social Science Research Center, and found that there were really well over 620,000 embryos in frozen storage in the U.S. And as you know, each clinic has to report numbers to the Centers for Disease Control, and in looking at that data, you can see that the number of IVF cycles is growing by about 4 to 6% every year. So we can imagine that the number of embryos in frozen storage is actually increasing at a similar rate. Also in that RAND-SART survey, they found that about 4% of the embryos in that group of 400,000 that they found back in 2001 were abandoned embryos. If you apply that 4% to 600,000, we're talking about 24,000 embryos. I suspect the number is higher. The Embryo Adoption Awareness Center has been working with all of the clinics around the country for a number of years, and I actually had a clinic in the Northwest tell me that they thought that about 30% of the embryos they had in storage were abandoned embryos, which to me it's an amazing number. And so we need to be looking at that and figuring out what is a solution to that problem. So here are some questions for you to consider. Are you frustrated by patients who have quit paying for their storage? I imagine the answer to that is yes. Are you burned out from trying to contact these families who just won't answer your outreach efforts to them? Do you have impatient patients on your donor embryo waiting lists? Do you have patients who would donate if they knew they could choose the recipient family? We have found that there are families out there with remaining embryos who don't want to donate to a clinic program because it's an anonymous donation, and they would prefer to choose the family. So maybe you've just decided to give up on this idea of pursuing families with abandoned embryos. We have a new idea. It may not be brand spanking new, but we want to help out. So here is your poor billing department, the Bulldog, trying to get people to respond to communications from your clinic, and he is just plumb tuckered out. So now the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center is willing to step up and help out with this. So I want you to be thinking about how many of your patients have decided to quit paying their storage bill. And I know you're probably all aware of the ASRM guidelines for abandoned embryos, which I just looked up again online before I started the webinar. Basically, it's 5 years since the last contact with the family. The guideline is that the clinic can thaw the embryos and destroy the embryos by thawing the embryos and get them out of storage if your clinic is willing to do that. In my conversations with clinics, have found that there are quite a number of clinics that are not willing to thaw abandoned embryos. So what else can we do about that situation? We want to figure out, is it possible to get some of those abandoned embryos out of storage and into wombs? I'm looking for about 10 clinics to participate in this project, and the participation will be on a first-come, first-served basis. So I hope as a result of our brief webinar this morning, some of you will give some consideration to our proposal and get in touch with us and let us know if you have an interest. Even if more than 10 clinics respond, I'm going to start out with 10 clinics just to see how the program progresses. If it is successful, we'll do it for some additional clinics. Isn't this a funny picture? I love that. So what exactly are we proposing, and what is so different about it? I have to say that I don't think it's incredibly different, but I think what we're doing is trying to take a different approach to it that maybe looks a little bit different than the communications that have been coming from your clinic. Some of you may be old enough to remember this TV show, Let's Make a Deal. What's behind door number 1, 2, or 3? Well, when we reach out to the patients, we're going to be providing them with 3 options. The first option is to donate anonymously to your clinic donation program. The second is to choose to make a directed donation through the Snowflake's Embryo Adoption Program, or we're going to give them the option to send a check with their delinquent storage payment to your clinic. And I'm hoping by adding that third element in there, it kind of gives them a little bit of a poke to say, you know, you really just need to make a decision about what's going to happen with these embryos, and here are 2 positive decisions that you can make about them. And if you don't want to make a decision about their disposition, well, please send us a check for the storage payment, okay? So we are bringing you communication burden relief. There is going to be no cost to you for doing this program. It's going to be managed by me and my team here in Colorado. We're going to be developing some new marketing materials. There is a minimal time requirement burden on the clinic, and the patient choices, as you saw on the previous slide, are going to be very limited as far as what we're going to be asking them to do with the embryos. So the good news is there's no cost to your clinic. This is funded by the grant that we were awarded last fall by the Department of Health and Human Services. I have been managing this grant now since 2007 here in Colorado, and it is a grant specifically to increase awareness and participation in embryo donation and adoption throughout the United States. The initial participation of clinics will be limited, but the program will be expanded if we see that we're having success in what we're doing. So the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center was established in 2007. I told you some of the statistics about Nightlight Christian adoptions. We are not some fly-by-night. I do have experience with marketing, and specifically marketing embryo donation and adoption throughout the country. And so what I'm trying to communicate to you is that you're working with a reputable organization, and we are going to be representing you in the best light possible. So the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center will be responsible for the design and development of the piece that's going to be sent out to your patients. Each of the pieces will be uniquely branded for your clinic. We are going to be taking care of the printing and the shipping management. And of course, everything that we create is going to be reviewed and approved by you before it ever goes out to your patient. So we are working with a local marketing organization to help us professionally develop and design the package. It's not going to look like a bill, and we're really thinking about what does this thing need to look like in order to entice people to open it up and look at what we are proposing to them. Again, it is going to be branded with your clinic information, so we're going to be looking to get your brand from you to put it onto the communication. We're going to present the idea for these 3 options that are available to them as simply as possible. And there's going to be an easy response document, which is basically just check the box that you want to participate in and mail that back to your clinic. So you're going to be the central collection point for the documents being sent back in from the patient. We're not going to try and do legal documents in this package. That will come afterwards. So if they say they want to donate anonymously through your clinic, then of course you would reach out to that patient and do whatever paperwork you normally do for an anonymous donation. And if they want to do a directed donation through Snowflakes, of course we would have a process set up for them in that, and you would mail that particular return document to us here at the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center, and we would reach out to that patient about a directed donation. So we're trying to make it really attractive, interesting, easy to understand, easy to respond to. So there's a minimal investment on behalf of the clinic. We need for you to identify those patients that you would like to include in this program. They don't have to be patients that you've lost contact with for 5 years, although you may have a list of patients that you've lost contact with for 5 years. But we want the list of patients that you have that you would qualify as difficult to communicate patients that have quit paying their storage bill. We really want to get patients to make a decision about their remaining embryos to donate them for reproduction. So we need you to compile a file with the last known mailing address. And just yesterday I was thinking, hey, how about also the last known email address? Now I want to be clear that the document is going to be coming from your clinic. I'm going to be managing the shipping from here, but I am not going to see this patient information. It is just going to go directly from a file that you create to the shipping house. The shipping house I work with does medical shipping all the time and is very familiar with this process. What we will do is also scrub the last known mailing address list that you provide to us, and the USPS will either provide us with an updated address if they have it, or if nothing has been delivered to that address for over a year, we will just delete that address from the mailer and, of course, let you know which addresses have been changed or scrubbed. So these lists are going to be managed by clinic personnel only so we can comply with the HIPAA rules and regulations. The idea for the email address is that perhaps we can come up with a attractive email here, do the development of that email here, and send it then to your clinic and have the email, of course, come from one of your clinic email accounts to your patients to also maybe reach out to them via email, if that's a possibility. So this is the idea. So we would have a point person assigned at your clinic for us to work with, and they would also be the people receiving the completed patient forms. So what is the expected outcome? Of course, the expected outcome is that the patient, some number of these patients are going to return the enclosed form with, to your clinic specifically with their selection. And so the selections are pretty straightforward. They can either donate anonymously to your clinic donation program. They can choose the recipient for their donation through the Snowflakes program, or they can pay their delinquent storage bill. If they want to use the Snowflakes program, you would just forward the form to us, and we'll reach out then to the patient. I have had a couple of clinics say, well, you know, we have some specific qualities for the embryos that are donated to our program, and if for some reason the embryos that the family wants to donate don't meet your requirements, they can still donate their embryos through Snowflakes because we will accept all qualities of embryos. And so if they indicate that they're interested in donating their embryos anonymously through their clinic, yet the quality of the embryos are such that you don't want to put them into your donor program, we can just be in communication with one another to determine if we should reach out to the family and say, hey, the clinic can't accept your donation, but the Snowflakes program can. You can donate anonymously through Snowflakes, but I will tell you that our counselors will be discussing open relationship with the recipient family with the donor, because that is a significant, important part of our program. So we're not expecting perfection. But if we don't try, we can't win, and you may remember little Kari Strug here from the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, who did her first vault and twisted her ankle quite severely, but went again and vaulted a second time and pushed through the pain to win the championship. And so we're not expecting perfection, but we are going to try just like little Kari Strug tried. I love that photograph. So I'm going to open up the phones for questions. If you are interested in participating, Deb Uber is our fertility clinic liaison. Her contact information is there on the screen. I'm going to leave that open.